What's shakin'? Hey, I'm Rick Jordan, and today we're going all in. There's this word of the year that Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, always puts out, and guess what that word was for this past year? Gaslighting. Searches rose by 1,740%. 1,740% over the last 12 months. Looked up several times every single day. And I want to talk a little bit about that word today because I saw this and I was like, man, it's like, that's interesting because this word has existed for a long time, but it really just started popping up and it's become part of like our regular speech over the last couple of years. And obviously, because now it's the word of the year because it's been the most searched word. It's so interesting. But let's define it, right? This is what they say, right? Merriam-Webster is the act or practice of grossly misleading somebody, especially for one's own advantage. And this one hits home for me because, I wrote a book about situational ethics and how your ethics changes because of the different pressures around you and what you want to achieve. And that's typical of most people in this world, and gaslighting kind of falls in line with that. So I want to give you some examples of that, but there's even more to it than just that. And this is where it gets into like abuse territory. I want to be real with you today because if you're in this kind of relationship or, you hear this from your boss or whoever, you're going to hear these things that'll actually start to make you question your own reality, right? Like, well, what did that happen? And that's gaslighting as well. Look it up because if somebody says like, oh, no, that's not how it happened. We'll talk about some of these phrases today, but if they're trying to skew your perception of reality and you find yourself succeeding, like almost like you feel like you're going a little crazy, because you were sure that something happened the way that it did, but now this person's trying to persuade you otherwise. That's gaslighting. And often it comes with a lot of negative energy. You can identify it. It's not a loving tone. It's not a supportive tone. It's very much like a condescending tone is how this happens, but it can cause you to question your reality. That's when you know that this is gaslighting because it's for that person's own advantage. That's why you have different tones. So start to look out for this. Because when you start to open your eyes for this, you're going to start to see it all over the place, especially if you are in this type of relationship right now. Here's some examples of it, right? And then maybe some things. So you might find yourself doing some of these, not exactly with the intention that I just described, to help yourself by changing someone else's perception of reality, just to get ahead, to win, in arguments and conflicts. I always never really enjoyed when somebody is just listening to respond rather than listening to actually understand. Gaslighting, there's a lot of listening just to respond because it's like they're already pre-planning their response to rebuke you, to rebuttal whatever it is that you're saying in order to change and skew your perception of reality just so they can win for their own sake. That's sucks. That's horrible, right? And that's powerful negativity. All right. So let's look at some examples here. Like if somebody says, I'm sorry you feel that way, that's freaking gaslighting because they don't care how you feel. And that's horrible, especially if you're in a relationship. The right way to say something like that is like, I understand how you feel. From what I'm hearing you tell me, you feel this way. Well, I disagree respectfully, but here's how I see it. And that's a productive conversation because you're validating what that individual just says. You're validating their feelings because people can feel whatever they want. Even if it's based on something that could be untrue, those emotions in that moment are real. And they need to be validated, especially if you're in a relationship, a romantic relationship, and you want to move forward through this and have a productive conversation that's still connecting because you can still remain connected in conflict. Then when somebody says, I'm sorry you feel that way, that's freaking gaslighting. That's them saying, I don't really care how you feel. All that matters is how I feel. That's horrible. So they could say, I understand that you feel like blah, blah, blah. Or they could say something like, I'm sorry I made you feel that way. There's a lot of coaches out there that will say things like, and all these Instagram people that you can't make anybody else feel anything. I disagree. I think that you're making somebody else feel different things or influencing their emotions almost every single minute of every single day in every interaction that you have. That's why it's so important to be respectful and not gaslight. Okay, you tracking with me on this so far? I mentioned this one a little bit ago. Here's another example of gaslighting. Oh, that's not what happened. Did you hear my tone too? So if somebody says, this is what took place, and it doesn't, it just doesn't sound right to you, they're explaining their perception of things, which could be emotionally driven, sometimes even filtered through some trauma or whatever it is, and they could just be flat out wrong. But at the same time, that's how they're perceiving the situation. In order to meet them and not gaslight and say, that's not what happened, unless you're like showing them a freaking video footage or something like that, or an email or whatever, that's the only time when you have cold, hard facts. You always go back to what you know, like undeniable, verifiable facts when it comes to conflict. So what you can count on that is that individual is perceiving the situation in a different way. That So that's where you have to meet that individual, because in respect to them, instead of saying that's not what happened and gaslighting them, you could say something like, oh, that's not how I thought it happened. Here's what I see. Are you open to hearing how I see it? So at the moment, you're validating not that they're right, not that they perceive things in a correct way, in a factual way. You're just acknowledging that they see it differently than you. That's how you meet them in the middle. Okay, that's powerful, and that'll help you move through the conversation, move through the conflict, hopefully to resolution. All right? Another one that's here this is horrible. Oh my gosh. If somebody says, oh, you're overreacting, what if to that person they're not, because they could be so passionate in the moment, because it could be like a value or just something that just like an underlying core part of that individual, which is why they're responding a certain way to whatever the situation is. And it's just important to them. So instead of saying you're overreacting, or you're off your rocker, or you know what, why do you always go off the deep end? Those kinds of phrases, that's gaslighting. That's changing that individual's perception of reality for your own benefits. That's bad. All right. So if somebody's doing this to you, shut them down right away. Shut them down right away. You can walk away. You can leave the house, whatever it is, because a respectful way for somebody being just that, like in the moments, hot, passionate, whatever, just blowing up, if you want to say that, because a blow up is real. It's legitimate, right? It can be. You can just say, you know what? Oh, wow, this must be really important to you. Well, I've got some things that are important to me too. Could we talk about these together? You see how that's so different? That brings in both parties together with whatever this is, and it helps de-escalate the scenario, because you are now recognizing the other person's feelings and how important they feel whatever this issue or whatever this value is. And I didn't realize it was so important to you. I've got some things that are important to me too. Could we talk about both of these angles? See, that's respectful, rather than just saying, oh, you're overreacting, which is gaslighting. I hope you're tracking with me here, because you're probably picking up some things, and your eyes might be opening. I know your eyes are opening wide right now to probably how you've been treated, pretty poorly by a partner or whatever else, right? Here's another one. And this one, I'm going to flip the script a little bit on this one, because this one is just, it's self-depreciation. But self-depreciation, while it could seem like somebody is feeling bad in the moment, it's actually an attempt to get attention. Right? So this skews the reality and brings somebody back to you, rather than actually validating your feelings in the scenario. So this is like coming the other way. It's horrible. So somebody could just say, well, I guess I'm just a really bad partner. I guess I'm just a really bad girlfriend. I guess I'm just a really bad husband. When something like that comes on, like, oh, I guess I'm just horrible to you. It's twofold. One, it's not actually acknowledging that there could be some wrongdoing of themselves in that scenario, right? Because they're just like blaming it on something that's almost more intangible, rather than focusing on their actual actions and behaviors in the moments. It's bad, because it completely shifts off the topic at hand to something completely different. Remember, I was talking about changing your perception of reality? That's gaslighting. That's exactly what this is. And this is one of the worst kinds of it too. Because if they cared about what you feel, and about more specifically how they are acting or behaving, it would be more like something like this. Oh, geez, what I did wrong was sorry, or I'm sorry, I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't realize that my actions affected you so poorly. So I'm sorry. What can I do different? In those moments, they're acknowledging you. They're acknowledging the way that you feel, rather than just throwing it off and saying, because if you have a grievance, and this happens in relationships, if you have a grievance and something that needs to be resolved between you and your partner, and that individual says, I guess I'm just a really bad partner. I guess I'm just a really bad boyfriend. That they are not willing to actually look at themselves in the mirror in that topic, or probably at all, because I bet you if they say this once, they say it a lot of times. You're going to start to recognize this as you look back, right? Rather than just saying, oh, you know what? I might not be right, or you might not be right about that, or maybe I disagree, but I didn't know what I did affected you in that way, and I'm sorry. They might be able to shift their action, or actually just even have an understanding on how you are affected by what they are doing. That is respectful. That's freaking amazing. And that will actually get you through a lot of these conflict scenarios. Gaslighting escalates. Respect de-escalates.